What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gooner channel, a channel 100% dedicated to the Arsenal, who, as we all know, are by far the greatest team the world has ever seen. And the question for debate in this video is Edu Gaspar, our newly appointed sporting director, our first ever sporting director, doing a good job. Now, if you're like me, that question will probably seem a bit bizarre to you because since he was appointed, we have extended or are in the process of extending the contracts of 5 key players. Martinelli, Saka, Ramsdale, Saliba and Odegaard have all committed their long-term futures, and for the first time in what seems like forever, we are not worried about bigger clubs coming in and taking away our best players. In fact, if you add to that the transfer business we've done and bringing players in, we managed to sign Declan Rice. Now, Edu Gaspar took a lot of heat for not getting this deal done when it looked like Man City were going to sweep in and take him away from us, but they didn't. He chose Arsenal. If you're going to criticise Edu for not getting that deal done, then surely he deserves a little bit of credit when he actually gets the deal done. No? And then there's Jurriën Timber, who, from what we saw of him in the pre-season, looks like an excellent signing, providing cover not only at right back and centre back, where we know we were short, but also, it turns out, as a really competent deputy for Zinchenko, or possibly even challenging Zinchenko for a first-team start on the left. Now, it's a huge disappointment to all of us that Timber was injured, but it only happened last week, and you can't really blame Edu Gaspar for signing a player who then gets injured. He also brought in Kai Havertz, who so far is proving to be divisive among the fan base. It's not necessarily a signing that many of us would have picked, but it does look like it was one that Arteta wanted. He has a plan for Kai Havertz, and Edu Gaspar's job surely is to provide the manager with the kind of squad he thinks he needs to challenge for a title, and Edu's definitely done that. Then there's the signing of David Raya from Brentford. One of last season's best Premier League goalkeepers turned down a 40 million move to Tottenham to join Arsenal on a season-long loan with an option to buy for just 27 million. It's hard to see that as anything other than great business. So why is Edu Gaspar coming up for criticism from members of our fan base? Well, let me play you a caller to AFT Fan Zone who made the case not only that he didn't think Edu's doing a fantastic job, but actually, well, let's hear from him.
I actually think in terms of our departures, it's been a bit of a disgrace, to be fair.
I think that's fair.
I talk about this, about Edu on a regular basis, and okay, you can accept he's done a good job in terms of the contract renewals this summer. He's done a good job in terms of the players that he's brought in, but they're not the only two factors to a transfer window. A large factor is outgoings. What can you get? Who are you going to move on? How much money can you move them on for? And apart from Turner and Granit Xhaka, they're the only two notable departures so far. And there's still so many players, James, that we need to move on from this football club. Cedric, Holding, Lokonga, Tavares. I could reel off players.
So as you can hear there, Edu Gaspar's performance in selling players that are surplus to Arsenal's requirements is actually a disgrace. Now, I think that is a deliberately hyperbolic word that was chosen to really emphasise the caller's feeling that we're not doing good enough at clearing out players. He says Holding, Cedric, Tavares and Lokonga, and I could reel off more names. Well, first of all, I want to address that point. Can you really reel off more names? The Arsenal men's squad is 32 strong. Now, if you took out the players that are clearly in Arteta's plans, that have played, that are going to feature this season, that's 23 players. That leaves you with 9 players who clearly aren't going to feature, who ideally we would move on and get as much money as possible for. Now, last night, we found out that Kieran Tierney will be joining Real Sociedad on a season-long loan. They will cover 100% of his wages and give us a loan fee. And whilst I know that many of you would rather Kieran Tierney stayed, that does look like a done deal now. Add to that, Folarin Balogun is apparently close to sealing a permanent move to Monaco for 40 million. Worth mentioning that would represent our biggest ever transfer fee out, the previous record being 38 million for Oxlade-Chamberlain. The only other players he hasn't mentioned on that list who aren't featuring in the plans are Arthur Okonkwo, our 4th choice goalkeeper, who spent a season on loan last year at Sturm Graz and performed really well for them, is expected to leave. He's on £1,500 a week, so not really a massive wage bill. Nicola Pepe, who, as we all know, hasn't worked out at Arsenal, has a year left on his contract and is on £140,000 a week. And El Neni, Mohamed El Neni, who is on £55,000 a week, and many of you feel should leave the club. 7 players, just the 3 more than were mentioned in. The criticism of Edu Gaspar is he doesn't seem capable of selling players. Well, first of all, there are 3 ways that you can realistically sell a player. There is the first way, which is putting them on the transfer list. Now, the advantage of putting them on the transfer list, and this is an actual list, by the way, that players can be added to by teams to make it clear that they are available for transfer. Now, in the case of all of the players we've mentioned, I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't think that we'd sell them. I don't think that adding them to the transfer list would make a material difference in alerting the world to their availability. But what it would do is it would probably reduce the amount we could ask for, because whilst teams are not sure whether you want to keep them or not, they have to offer an amount of money that would be tempting to sell them. So the transfer list is one way of doing it, and the other way of doing it is to literally phone around and tout these players out. Is it Edu Gaspar's fault that these players are not being sought after? Are we turning down really great offers? I'm going to go through them one by one. 7 players on the transfer list that we really should be moving on, or ideally would move on before the start of the season so we could reinvest whatever we get from them into the team. The total weekly wage bill of those 7 players is £390,000 a week, or roughly £20 million in a season. First of all on that list is Cedric Soares, who spent last season on loan at Fulham with Marco Silva. It was hoped that he would play enough games to raise his profile and then ideally seal a permanent move there, but it didn't work out. For whichever reason, he barely played last season, and when he did, he hardly set the world on fire. Remember, he was a free transfer. He has a year left on his contract, and it does look like we're going to terminate that contract. So, can you blame Edu Gaspar for that? I'm not really sure what more he could have done. The next player on the list is Rob Holding. Now, we had a £2 million offer from Besiktas. Apparently, they're interested in renegotiating, but that is as yet undone. And again, it's very hard for me to see what Edu Gaspar could have done differently here. Rob Holding is a player that there is not enough interest in, that there are not enough clubs who see Rob Holding as the perfect solution to their problem. And you could see that from the derisory amount that was offered by Besiktas at £2 million. We've turned that down, and I don't think that was a terrible idea. I think we can hold on to Rob Holding. He did play last season. He was cover, and at a push, he might even be considered cover again this season. But Rob Holding is a player that Edu Gaspar is getting criticised for not moving on when it doesn't seem that anyone wants Rob Holding. I personally wouldn't want Rob Holding. I think he's a great guy, and if he brings something to the dressing room and he's one of the older heads in the dressing room, he's been around longest, then is Edu Gaspar doing something terrible in not moving him on? As I said, there are still ongoing negotiations to move him on, and so by the end of the week, he might well have gone to Besiktas for 3 or 4 million, and then, that's good business. Albert Sambi Lokonga. Now, before the transfer window and at the start of the transfer window, it was claimed that Vincent Kompany's newly promoted Burnley were very seriously thinking about bringing him in, but the player himself seemed to be a stumbling block in that. Of course, he'd worked with Vincent Kompany before, and Vincent Kompany had previously said very nice things about him, but that seems to have stalled. Brighton also apparently were interested in him. We don't know where that is yet. He may still go. Nuno Tavares. He was a player that came in as cover for Kieran Tierney. Started off quite brightly, but then it all fell apart quite quickly. Substituted in the first 33 minutes of a game, which is never a good sign, and apparently fell out with Arteta and the coaching staff, who don't want him anywhere near the squad anymore. He went on loan last season to Marseille, started really brightly, scored on his debut, then fell out with the coaching staff. Now, at the moment, it's claimed that Villa are interested in him. We've seen a move from Forest for him fall apart. Unai Emery at Villa is keen apparently, and that's an ongoing situation that may yet be resolved, and there is apparent interest in him from Werder Bremen and Wolfsburg. At this point, he hasn't moved, and his agents apparently landed in London just a couple of hours ago to discuss that move. Then there's Nicola Pepe. Nicola Pepe signed to great fanfare. Everyone was really happy to see him come in. It hasn't really worked out for him. He cost a record-breaking £72 million, and with a year left on his contract and a current weekly wage bill of £140,000, it's... Our key problem here is that nobody wants to offer us a transfer fee for him if they think that we're going to terminate his contract anyway and they can pick him up for free. There is some negotiation to be done around that. I'd love to see a club, perhaps, and there's been rumours about a Saudi club. Be fantastic if we got anything for him at all, because the world knows that he's not part of our plans. He was on loan last season to Nice and really wasn't that special. And the kind of salary he's on, it's unlikely anyone's going to offer us anything. Again, hard to know what Edu Gaspar is supposed to do about that. So if the other player on this list is Mohamed El Neni, again, less than a year left on his contract. Now, I just want to add to this that Mohamed El Neni is really not popular among many people and they think he's not good enough. But whenever he was asked to come in and perform for Arsenal, he's done a better job than expected. He's tidy, he doesn't give the ball away much, and he's good defensive cover. But, I get it. If he's not your bag and you want to see him move on, what are you hoping for from a player of his age with relatively few games played in the last couple of seasons and less than a year on his contract? Just like Nicola Pepe, teams are not going to come in and offer you huge amounts of money. So, is the criticism for Edu Gaspar fair? Well, if we accept that he's done a great job on contract renewals, if we're happy with the players he's brought in so far, and accept that the last-minute injury to Timber means he probably has to dip back into the market, it's not really fair to criticise him on players in if he's still got 6 days to do that. Perhaps at the end of the window we can have another discussion about it if we haven't further strengthened. But look, it puts us in a really difficult position with 6 days to go and get cover for Yuri and Timber. I do think we need to dip back into the market for cover, but I'm willing to hold off judgment until the transfer window is closed. And even if we don't get anyone else in, I can hardly blame Edu Gaspar for going and getting a player who looks as good as Timber for as little as we paid for him, and then seeing him injured in the first game week of the season. So is Edu Gaspar failing us getting rid of these players? If Cedric and Pepe go because their contracts are terminated, they're gone. If we hold on to Holding because no one's offered us more than 2 million for him, I can understand that. If Lokonga and Tavares aren't moved on, which I think they will be, by the way, I really do think those two players will move on, then it's really come down to them as well. When you're criticising Edu Gaspar for not having moved these players on, what is it you want him to do? I don't think it's a disgrace unless, we were offered 100 million for Lokonga and turned it down because we forgot to read an email or something. That would be a disgrace. It's very hard to drum up interest in players who other clubs don't want. They know they're available. There are clubs in for them. We are negotiating. I hope that we can do good deals here. But after those players, there is not a list of players that are not fitting the squad. Arthur Okonkwo will probably get a move. But since he's earning £1,500 a week, it's not pressing, is it? It's not an urgent piece of business that he's not doing. I think if Edu Gaspar moves on the 6 players that I've just listed, does that mean he's done an outstanding job? Can everyone get behind him? Of course, I want to know what you think. Have I missed a player? Is there a player in the 32-man squad that I haven't discussed who you would like to see move on, who you don't think is good enough? Let's not bring Kai Havertz into the debate because clearly he's just been signed. Maybe there is a player you think is surplus to requirements and that you're angry with Edu Gaspar for not noticing that. Of course, it must ultimately come down to Arteta's decision as well. Personally, I'm thrilled with the work that's being done at Arsenal at the moment. I'm thrilled at the fact that we have a summer transfer window almost closed without any of the key players we want to keep having their heads turned. Gabriel doesn't look like he's going to Saudi. That was a worry. I'm really thrilled with the fact that we've brought in the kind of players that we have. I think we did a fantastic job. It is gutting that Timber's injured, and perhaps we do need to further strengthen, given that he's likely to be out for 6 or 7 months. But it's hard to do that. You can't just bring in a player knowing that they'll probably go down the pecking order as soon as the player who's injured. It's a tough job. I don't know who is out there. I wanted to see Laporte maybe, or Pavard. It's not clear that that's going to get done. But let's not rule it out. And finally, selling players. Yeah, it's hard. It is really hard to sell players like Rob Holding. It is really hard to sell players like Nicola Pepe. And we are not the only club that is finding it hard to move players on. There are teams out there with far more problems in this department than us. Edu Gaspar, if you're watching, and I'm sure you are. If you haven't, by the way, subscribe, Edu. I would really welcome your subscription. But if you're watching this, Edu, I think you're doing a fantastic job. And I also just want to add that Edu Gaspar is not personally responsible for all of this. There is a team of people that he supervises who are doing this. And I think they're doing a fantastic job. Let me know in the comments if you think I've gone completely mad, if you agree with the caller to AFTV. And also, I just want to say, I really appreciate you for watching this video. It means so much to me. We're a new channel starting out. Subscriptions, likes and comments are the lifeblood of any new channel. So thank you so much for getting involved. And until I see you again, be lucky and lots of love.